And now we return to our supervision filmed at the Lautpot Center for International Law for a discussion of SDG 9, Industry, Innovation and Infrastructure.
SDG 9 seeks to build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation by 2013. And specifically, Target 9.1 aims to develop quality, reliable, sustainable, and resilient infrastructure, including regional and trans-border infrastructure to support economic development and human well-being, with a focus on affordable and equitable access for all. My question is, how can trade and trade rules promote resilient infrastructure?
So this is so I'll take this one. This is a big question. I mean, this SDG has big goals, and it's not obvious that everything is working in the same direction, right? So it's not sustainable industrialization in itself is a real challenge, right? And so when we think about the infrastructure we're building, if it's say energy infrastructure, we might want to build solar fields or wind turbine fields, but that's only going to provide energy at times when the sun is shining and the wind is blowing. And for a lot of heavier industry, you have to have a constant flow of electricity, which means that you need to have a mix where you have maybe the cheap and clean energy alongside this dirtier energy made as clean as possible. But you can't run a steel factory if you don't have a constant guaranteed source of electricity. And a lot of manufacturing is like that. So I think there's a bit of a tension here. On the one hand, when we think about trade rules, there is a tension thinking we want things to be clean. One of the biggest, threats to human life, especially in urbanizing areas, which right now are, it's Africa is the most urbanizing part of the world, is we want clean air to keep children alive. Pollution from, combustion engines and power plants kills people. So we have to think about how do we get as much energy infrastructure and as much, road and transport infrastructure as we can, but at the same time we need to keep it as clean as possible. And clean at the moment is still pretty costly in a lot of places. So there's some balance. The question is how do trade rules? Well, we want to think about getting a right balance here. So one area around transportation and carbon is really, do we have a global universal carbon price that's the same everywhere in the world? And if we think about, some of the challenges, particularly to low-income countries, things like Europe's carbon border adjustment mechanism, fundamentally, I think it's seeking to bring down the cost of clean energy, but at the same time, it's trying to prevent the movement of industry from places like Germany to potentially places in sub-Saharan Africa. And so we've got to think about how do we finesse this transition so that at the same time we provide incentives in low and middle income countries for us to build more clean energy infrastructure and sort of facilitate a movement toward cleaner, transportation vehicles, while at the same time, if we get a little too heavy-handed and say we won't import if you have too much carbon in the production process of something, that's actually going to slow and deter development in lower income. So we have to be really careful about how we structure these rules, that we don't have too many heavy-handed, rules that are essentially going to become prohibitions on imports from low and middle income countries. While at the same time, the biggest beneficiaries of cleaner energy are going to be, the youngest people in low and middle income countries who will have, longer lives if the air is cleaner.
And we have a second question on SDG 9.
Yeah, so Target 9.3 aims to increase the access of small-scale industrial and other enterprises, in particular in developing countries, to financial services, including affordable credit and their integration into value chains and markets. So I was hoping that you could please share how changes in trade rules can promote such access to financial services.
Yes,
I can take that. Now we evaluated small medium enterprises again, and we asked them, actually what they preferred is to work with prime contractors, big contractors. Why? Because of this difficulty in financial access. if they become subcontractor of prime contractors is absorbing the risk of financial. So it's like, you don't want direct engagement? No, we want to work with prime contractors so that this particular, because you couldn't get financial support, easy access to credit. But if we are subcontracting with prime contractors, then this issue is addressed. Now, to give you one specific example on how this intertwined, I worked with OECD in 2019. We evaluated how to address the issue of infrastructure development in Olympics, more particularly in International Olympics, because if you know, infrastructure development in International Olympics result to elephant infrastructure. So to address that, say, okay, we evaluated all the infrastructure projects of all the Olympics so that we can recommend measures for the Paris Olympic. So the idea is evaluate and recommend measures. And you know what? The recommendation that we did is just your project, infrastructure projects for Olympics in Paris should be done by prime contractors, but there is a requirement to subcontract to local small enterprises in Paris, and then make sure that there are women, make sure that they're socially disadvantaged. And if you look at how the infrastructure project for the Paris Olympics is one of the best examples of how trade rules can really ensure that this is achieved.